Welcome to Impact the World, a podcast from West Park Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. This is where we discuss topics related to how we can all love God, love people, and impact the world. Here's your host, Tara Hayes.
Welcome, and I am your host, Tara Hayes, and it's great to be sitting down again with Jake.
Good to be back.
Yay! The last time Jake was with us, we were discussing his sermon, Digital Babylon, and we followed that up with an episode, How to Change, and we kind of touched on different spiritual disciplines, and that is what this series is flowing from. We've already talked about silence and solitude.
Correct.
And today we're going to talk about Sabbath.
Sabbath,
Which I think is fantastic. Jake and I were just discussing how frazzled we are. I thought, isn't it ironic? Today we're going to talk about Sabbath.
We need this.
All I want to do is take a nap.
Absolutely.
So, with that being said,
Sabbath.
Let's talk about it. What it is, what it isn't, practical tips.
Well, that's a good way to start. So let me just go to Scripture really quick and read Matthew chapter 11. Verses 28 through 30. And these are Jesus' words, and speaking, you've heard these before, but he says this, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When I hear those words, there's something that just comes up in me of like, I want that, right? Like when I hear that, I want that. And what I realize is sometimes I have that, but often I don't. And I feel like that everything in our world pulls against us having that kind of rest.
Yeah,
right?
And even good things.
Good thing. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Good things. I mean, I shared in the sermon a few weeks ago, Martha doing great things for Jesus and being distracted, right? And so it's a lack of rest, maybe for bad things, but often for good things. And so I hear these words, I say, I want that, right? Like I want that kind of rest for my soul. Like, I mean, I have 2 young kids, so physical rest, I want that too, a little bit more. They've been sick the last couple of days, so I want physical rest, but I want this rest for my soul that Jesus invites me into. But if you look at our culture, it doesn't seem like many people have this, right? We live in an exhausted age. And so I think this question of the Sabbath is as important as ever, maybe more important than ever. One example I have is one day I was just looking through, the books I have in my library on pastoral ministry. And I noticed there's this theme where, first of all, if you look through the books, most of them include some kind of chapter on the need for rest or you're going to burn out. Right, and so the basically saying pastors, like if you do not rest, you will not last. And I think that just applies to everyone, right? If you don't rest, you will not last. But then it's even more interesting and really sad is that if you start to look at the blurbs on the back of the book, like who endorsed it, it's hard to find a book on pastoral ministry that hasn't come out in the last year or two, where one of the pastors at least, often multiple of the pastors on those 3 blurbs on the back have either burned out or had a moral failure or just are not in pastoral ministry anymore. Right. And so that just screams to me of we know there's a problem, but we don't know what to do about it. Yeah. And so maybe that's you as you sit here and listen to this podcast. You're like, I need rest. Like we're saying right now, I need rest, but what do we do? What's the step that we can actually take? And my argument would be Sabbath.
Yeah.
Sabbath. That's Jesus' gift to us, the gift of Sabbath.
And I think it's something we don't talk about often.
No.
At all.
Why do you think that is? Let me turn it on you.
I think that a lot of people have a misconception of what Sabbath means. I think people go, oh, I can't go anywhere on Sunday but to church.
Yes. Yep.
Well, first of all, they pick a day.
Yep.
Sabbath is only Sunday.
Uh-huh.
I can't go anywhere but to church. I can't work. I can't do this. I can't. It's a list of things that they can and can't do.
That's good. Yep.
And I think, so the true meaning of Sabbath, which I'm excited that you're going to tell us, is lost. It's a perception.
That's good. And that's a great place to start. I was gonna say exactly that, because I think some people I talk to, they just have negative connotations around it, right? Like my mom has these memories. She had great godly parents, but she has these memories of Sunday being the worst day because she couldn't do anything. She she loved to wash the car. I don't know why she loved to do that, but she wasn't allowed to wash the car.
House.
Yeah, I don't know why, but she wasn't allowed to do the things she wanted to do, right? And so there's a lot of sometimes some people think of Sabbath as just legalism, right? Another thing I think we get caught up in is all the theological arguments around Sabbath, right? So is there a day? Does it need to be Sunday?
Does it have to be, right?
Or is it Saturday, right? The Seventh-day Adventist, or is it Saturday? Is it something that even matters to us today? So it's in the Ten Commandments, and
or they think of it as an Old Testament thing.
Yeah, it's an Old Testament thing, but so does it even translate to us in our New Covenant lives? So we're not supposed to murder, not supposed to do all these other things in the Ten Commandments.
But I don't have to rest.
Yeah, but do I have to keep the Sabbath? Do I have to keep that holy? And so I'll say this, like on this podcast, I am totally punning and sidestepping and do everything to get away from that conversation. That's not my conversation. That's not my goal here. That's not what I'm entering into. You can read hundreds of books on that subject, and
there's a lot more than what we can say here.
I haven't done that. But here's what I'll say. My only argument here is taking 24 hours of your week to intentionally stop and rest is a wise thing to do. That's the only argument that I'm trying to make. It's a wise thing to do because the thing is, we're not God, right? Which actually, God took a day off, right? Like it's
right. So why do we think we don't have to?
That seems to be ingrained in the universe, right? Where God even shows us he stopped his work,
right?
But we're not God, and so we need to take a day. Like we're God upholds the universe, right? We don't, right? God is the one who is completely sovereign over everything. We're not.
But we have that mentality of, I have to do this. If I don't work on this today, if I don't get this done, then this is going to fall apart, then this won't happen. And we don't realize that we take on that mentality of God is sovereign, but I still need to help him out.
It's exactly. And so, we need to remember, I think I heard one author say it this way. Sabbath is an acknowledgement of the sovereignty of God, right? Another way to say it is this. Sovereign is how we get the gospel into our muscle memory, right?
I like that.
Because we don't have to, we don't work to earn God's love, right? We work out of that. We do everything out of that acceptance. And so the Sabbath is how we get that into our muscle memory, that we can stop and I'm still fully loved and accepted by the Father because of what Jesus Christ has done for me, right? And that's so hard. Like especially we're addicted to work. We're addicted to moving. We're like, I think it's true that sharks never stop, right? They always have to keep moving, right? We're like that. We can't stop. Yeah. And so Sabbath is to stop and say, God, you are in control.
Well, and don't you think that's pretty counterculture too?
Absolutely.
I mean, because you're always going, doing,
so
all that. It's so against our culture because when you ask somebody, how are you? Oh, I'm busy. That's like the first answer.
Exactly.
Or tired.
I'm tired. I'm busy, and that's a way of bragging, right? Because you're saying I'm important. I have things to do.
Right.
To stop is to almost admit that you're not what people think you are, right? Like to be burned out can be a badge of honor because you're a hard worker, right? And hard work is good. Okay, so we're called to rest, but we're also called to rest from work. So some people need to hear the opposite podcast about working, right?
You should be working.
Yes. But for those of us who have a hard time stopping from our work, it often is because our culture's pushing against us. It's a lack of trust.
Right.
And then maybe it's the kind of hang-ups with all the legalism that maybe we've experienced. Yeah. So I think that's a good baseline of maybe what keeps people from this. Now let me ask another question. What do we do? Okay, you're with me. Let's say, great. I need Sabbath. I just don't really know what does this look like. Okay, what does this look like? Well, I think there's 3 dimensions, and these 3, there you can find a bunch of different ways that people break up the Sabbath and talk about these dimensions in different ways. I got this from Derek Grizz, who used to be a pastor here on staff.
Oh, yeah, Derek.
And then he was the one who showed me these 3. He'll be quick to say that he's standing on the shoulders of others here, and this isn't necessarily new from him. But I think it's really helpful and has helped me wrap my mind around what the Sabbath actually is. And so it's 3 R's. So you can tell Derek worked at West Park for a while, right? Rubbed off on him.
That's right.
So 3 R's: rest, remembrance, and relationship. So at a minimum, that's what the Sabbath is about: rest, remembrance, and relationship. So I'll work through those really quick. So number 1, rest. Well, that is what makes the Sabbath day the Sabbath, because Shabbat is the word in Hebrew that Sabbath comes from, and it literally means to stop. So the Sabbath is meant to be a day to stop. And as we've talked about, that's what God did, right? So he creates everything, and then it's not that he was tired. He's the God of the universe, right? Like he's the God, he's the, the God of the universe, but he stopped what he was doing. And so we are invited in to do the same thing, to stop. Here's the explanation of the Sabbath from Exodus 20. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God." And so it's your day. You work for 6 days, and then on the Sabbath, we stop. And that sounds simple, but that's hard. Like that's hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really, and then we've kind of already talked about that. That is really hard. And so but we have to find ways to. I don't want to just do it. Like we just have to find
Be Nike about it. Just do it.
We have to find ways to work this in.
We have to have a practical plan to do that.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's good. So a practical plan to stop. And so let me give you some practicalities that I've found, and you can add in, from your experience here, but I'll give you what's worked for me so far. First of all, this is important. So when we're talking about stopping, we're talking about resting. It's important that we say relaxation doesn't equal rest. Okay.
I think that's very misunderstood often.
And I think it has been misunderstood for me my entire life, right? So maybe I understood that I need a day off to not work, but what I do is then I relax. And so, if you want to give me a day to relax, maybe that looks like here's a couch, here's a streaming, here's a football game or streaming service, and here's a calzone with pepperonis and mushrooms from Mellow Mushroom, because so good.
And you can get my pizza language.
And you can sit me down on the couch, and I can get relaxed very quick. I won't have a care in the world. But once that's over, I'm not rejuvenated, right? My soul is no more rested. I'm no less frazzled, right? There's a difference between relaxation and actual rest. And so rest is finding things that actually renew your soul. And so something I found here that's helpful, I can't remember this is not original to me, but I heard it from a pastor at some point. And he said to ask the question, what stirs my affections for Jesus? And do those things. That's what we do. And then actually you can ask the counter question and say, what robs me of my affections for Jesus? And avoid those things. That's what the Sabbath could look like. So for instance, what stirs my affections for Jesus? For me, here's a list I've made. Reading the Bible while drinking a good cup of coffee. Emphasis on good cup of coffee, right? It needs to be good. Time alone with my wife, taking my son Knox to the trampoline park, reading Christian books that are written really well, right? Not just information, but are beautifully written. This is a big one for me. Hiking in the mountains. If I can get to the Smokies, that is it. Being physically active, so not just being on the couch, actually being physically active. Really good food. This is embarrassing, but candles. Okay, in me and Allie's relationship, I'm the candle person. Okay, we have all of our pumpkin candles out, and
it's
they're
fall,
all
Jake.
It's all me. I am.
His
I am
candle
all
game
in.
is strong.
Deep conversations with friends, and then listening to sermons by Tim Keller. That's my boy, right? And so those are things that on the Sabbath, if I can do those things, those not only help me relax, but they restore my soul, right? And then on the flip side, what robs me of my affections for Jesus? Well, watching too much TV, spending too much time, flipping through social media, staying up late, getting too invested in fantasy football, being physically lazy, empty conversations, eating a ton of unhealthy foods, right? These are just things that when I do them, I may get relaxed, but I don't feel rested. And so that's the key. There's a difference between rest and relaxation. So that takes some strategy. Okay? It's easy to just sink into the couch, but Sabbath is a time to pursue those things that give us rest.
Well, and you have to think through that, and you have to work through certain scenarios, to see what is it that rejuvenates my love for Jesus. And I think the silence and solitude can go hand in hand with Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because it is that it kind of, for me, it kind of brings like, okay, if I'm having a Sabbath, then I'm having some time to meditate
Yes.
and think about. For me, I like to think about the attributes of God, like especially on a day if I'm struggling, on the bus, struggle bus. But just sitting and meditating on Scripture and who He is it's kind of that idea.
It reorients you.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I think. I think that's why I like the mountains so much, because being in nature reorients me to that.
Right.
I was like, whoa,
well,
this is our God. Like
exactly.
He, not the creation is our God. He created
this.
Yes, He created just like with a word. Like
right.
He created these amazing mountains
right.
and all these animals. And wow,
it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because as you were talking about that, I thought, I think I now understand why people years ago would take a Sunday drive.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
Of course, gas prices were not, $4 a gallon.
Yep.
But and traffic wasn't as crazy as it is now, but you could drive around out in the country, stop, take a walk somewhere, and it was just that idea of experiencing nature and
It's good.
Thinking about God.
And so I'll add one more here to the resting aspect of it is to have a Sabbath. You have to prepare to Sabbath. That's one mistake I think a lot of people make, is you're going to hear this and you're going to be like, wow, I need that. I want that rest. And even maybe we gain insights and say, yeah, like I want those. But it's hard to actually put those things into place. We have to prepare to Sabbath. It's really hard for a car going 100 miles per hour just to slam on the brakes, right? You have to slow
some whiplash.
into it, right? And so this is something that I've been studying, how people do it well. A lot of people have dinners right before they start their Sabbath, or big meals, or light a candle, something to signify like we're starting to slow down, like we're going into this different kind of time. And so you have to prepare. You have to have a plan for your technology, right? Where's your phone going? If you're going to keep it on you, like, is it going to be more harm than it is good, right? Like, what are you doing with Netflix and stuff? So you have to have a plan. So that's a big thing. Don't just go right into it. You have to have a plan of how to get into it.
But I'm finding that to be true of all of these spiritual disciplines.
Yes, absolutely.
They take intentionality, and they don't just happen.
That's it. Yeah, you have to have a plan. Not having a plan is planning to fail. I don't know. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, wherever that comes from. That's a famous. Yeah, that's
75 people have said it.
True.
We're not sure which one, but there it is.
Absolutely, it's true. So that's number one. Sabbath is rest. It's time to rest. Number two, the second dimension is remembrance. And so on the Sabbath day, we remember the Lord. We remember what He has done. We remember that He has rescued and redeemed us. We remember that He's always working and that He's always watching over us. And so that's actually, so the Sabbath is mentioned a couple times in the Old Testament. Here's the Deuteronomy one. It says basically all the same things. You need to stop and all that. But then at the end it says, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. And so, yes, it's about rest, but not just about rest. It's about exactly actually what you just said. You think on the attributes of God. You remember who God is. You remember what He's done, right?
Yeah.
Like you remember just how amazing He is. I love this quote, just is awesome. From A.J. Swoboda, and his book's called Subversive Sabbath. It's really good. He says, Sabbath is a scheduled weekly reminder that we are not what we do. Rather, we are who we are loved by. Sabbath and the gospel scream the same thing. We do not work to get to a place where we finally get to breathe and rest. That is slavery. Rather, we rest and breathe and enjoy God that we might enter into rest. And so we remember on the Sabbath, right? We slow down to think like, wow, okay, like I am a beloved child of the God of the universe. That's what we remember, right? And so, if your Sabbath is on Sunday, right? So that the Sabbath is not on, my Sunday is not on, or my Sabbath is not on Sunday because Sunday is my busiest day, right? So I have to, for me, it's Friday. But if your Sabbath is Sunday, what a great way to start off your day with worship with your church family, right? Like isn't that what we're doing? We're getting together and we're remembering what Jesus has done for us. We're remembering that we're not in this alone. Like we're in this together. We have others with us, right? Like that's what a worship service does. We remember what Jesus has done, and then you can live out the rest of the day in that remembrance. And so can't have Sabbath without remembrance,
Right.
right? So it's not just rest alone. And then here's the third dimension. I think this is big and often overlooked, but this was really helpful, and Derek's really helped me think through this one. The third one is relationship. Relationship. And so this is just a reminder that Sabbath is not just for the sake of Sabbath, it's for the sake of relationship. And so maybe, as you mentioned, parts of your Sabbath or a lot of your Sabbath may be spent alone, but it's not an excuse to be selfish, right? Like, I mean, because first of all, it's for our relationship with God, right? And so we can't find rest apart from God. If you go, like, true rest can only be found in Jesus. Matthew 11 that we just read, it's only found in Him. But the other thing we have to remember is Sabbath is also a day that we have to think about others, right? So I keep bringing up the definition of spiritual formation from Robert Mulholland. He says spiritual formation is the process of being formed in the image of Christ for the sake of others.
For the sake of others.
So if you remember, Jesus has a bunch of arguments about the Sabbath. He kept the Sabbath, but it was always these arguments with the Pharisees about how he was keeping the Sabbath.
Right.
And it often revolved around the fact that he was helping others on the Sabbath. He did not see the Sabbath as a time to not help others, right? He was trying, Jesus saw it as saw that he had an opportunity to actually bring other people into rest, right? He was going to help people, bring them into that Sabbath rest. And so that's just the big thing is it's not a time just to be selfish, and it's not just me time. It's not self-care day. That's not right. Like that's not it. It's not where you just wave your hand in front of the face. It's like, I don't have time for this today. It is my Sabbath, right? Like that's not it. We never are called as Christians. We're never allowed to stop loving others.
Right.
Like and the Sabbath is absolutely no exception to that. So.
I think that's probably a point that is not typically talked about when you talk about Sabbath. I've heard rest and remembrance, but you don't think about relationship as much. And I left it out of my sermon, so that's I'm part of the problem. I only use the two, but I ran out of time, so I left it out. You've just fixed it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then I'll kind of wrap up my section here with this. I got to throw a Tim Keller quote in there, right? So he says this: "The purpose of Sabbath is not simply to rejuvenate yourself in order to do more production, nor is it the pursuit of pleasure. The purpose of Sabbath is to enjoy your God, life in general, what you have accomplished in the world through His help, and the freedom you have in the gospel. The freedom from slavery to any material object or human expectation. The Sabbath is a sign of the hope that we have in the world to come."
Oh, wow.
Right? We are okay. Let's talk about that, right? Our hope as Christians is eternal rest, shalom, peace, flourishing, right? That one day Jesus is going to come back and He's going to make everything right. And we're going to live in the new heavens and new earth with Him for all of eternity. And He's going to wipe the tears from our eyes, and we're going to enjoy fellowship with Him and other believers, and we're going to just like wow, right? Like we're going to experience rest. These things where when I walk in here, I'm about to record this podcast, and we just say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm so sick. Oh, this is going on, and this pain and this heartbreak," and we're entering into that rest. And so Sabbath is actually a time, one time a week, to practice eternity.
Oh.
Like that's what we're doing.
That's wonderful.
We're practicing that. Like we're practicing what we're going to get to experience for all of eternity.
Wow.
Like on an imperfect scale, but that's what we're doing, is we're practicing doing that. And so...
And who amongst us does not need that?
No,
I mean,
we all do.
We all need that.
Yes.
And to live with that and, like in light of eternity, and to think about that.
Well, we need Sabbath because it's what we were. I think this is how we were made, right? It's a part of the grain of the universe. And I've heard someone say, if you go against the grain of the universe, you get splinters. Like God made us to where we weren't meant to work 24/7. That's not how we're meant to work. Sorry, one other fact that came to my head. I think it's a fact. I've heard it quoted over and over again. I've not seen the study, but
Probably
so maybe this is totally wrong.
Then.
I think it's a fact because a lot of people have quoted it who I trust. But they did a study on Seventh-day Adventists who, basically Sabbath is a huge part of what they do, right?
Yes.
Like, and so I won't get into all the disagreements there, but what they do, they practice Sabbath. And what they came to find out in this study is that Seventh-day Adventists tend to both be happier than the average person and to live 11 years longer.
Wow.
On average, and so the person who was doing the study kind of came to the conclusion, well, if you think about it, if you live for around 77 years, 11 years is that day that you rest. Like you basically would rest for a total of 11. So,
oh my goodness.
So it's almost like you're getting that time back almost because we're just made for rest. And so I think that there's something key there of this is how God has wired us. And so just something practical. Okay, I hope this convinces you need it, okay? That you need to rest, that you need to have Sabbath, that you need to stop and slow down. Here's what I'd say. Please don't leave this here, right? Because I know for me, a lot of times I'm really happy with new insight and I never actually apply it. Apply it, okay? Yeah. And so maybe turn this off and make a plan.
Yeah.
like that's the homework, right? Make a plan. When are you doing it? What's it going to look like? What are you going to do?
Who are you going to involve?
Who are you going to involve? Yeah. What relationships are you going to focus on? What are you going to do with your technology? Make a plan.
Make a plan.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, that's what I would love to see. Yeah. I think what we could experience in the whole of West Park, if people were actually taking Sabbath,
yes,
and making it a part of their lives. I mean, because that just not only is it rest for your soul, but it's helping you recenter on what the Lord has for you.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think that's exciting. Well, that book that you mentioned,
about
the Sabbath.
Yep, Subversive Sabbath.
Okay,
yep.
I'll list that in the show
that.
notes because people may want to read that. Like, there's a lot to be said about Sabbath.
There is, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to be said about all of these.
So that one's really good. There's another one that's kind of the classic one is called, I think it's just called The Sabbath by Abraham Joshua Heschel. So he's actually a Jewish guy.
There's a good biblical name for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a short little book and it's beautiful, but it's not written by a Christian. So that's an interesting. But it's a really awesome. So that one's kind of a classic. Another one. We're just gonna reference this every single week. So the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Palmer.
Every time you say that, I think, oh my word, I need to read the book.
But he does a great job as well in that book. And so that's that's your one-stop shop. If you want to buy that book, you have Silence and Solitude and you have Sabbath. Those are the first two things we talked about.
There you go.
That's what I would suggest. I would suggest that one. But.
Well, I think this has been a great discussion about Sabbath. It has certainly helped me think about what does that look like in my life, and has really excited me about, okay, I'm going to be more intentional and make a plan. I mean, in some ways I'm already experiencing Sabbath, but to make an intentional plan.
Yep.
And I think it honors God.
Yep.
And it's a sounds bad. It honors God and it's a benefit to us, but that's the way he designed it.
Well, absolutely. I'll end with this. Sorry. It's a gift.
Yeah.
Right? It is. God has given this to us as a gift. Take it.
Take it.
Right? Like, take
the
gift. I'm trying to look up the passage of what Jesus says to the Pharisees, right? He basically says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That's his response. Okay, so we can say the not man for the Sabbath part. That's kind of what he argues. But listen to that first part. The Sabbath was made for man. God made Sabbath for you. It is a gift that he is offering you. Take it.
There you go.
That's it.
And Jake and I are encouraging you to reach out and take the gift and experience it. It's been great. We'll sit down again soon.
Sounds
great.
Talk
about another bunch of other stuff. Listen, Jake and I have plans. But anyway, thanks for joining us today, and we hope and pray that you take a Sabbath very soon.
Thank you for listening to Impact the World, produced by West Park Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend.